sound? Is it still tinny? Okay? Sorry. It's truly an honor to be invited to be by this year's graduating class, to be here speaking to you as part of your commencement. You are truly a talented and inspirational group of students, and in considering what to talk about with you here today, I thought about your past and I thought about your future. I have been to a number of graduation events this year and have seen some of you at those as well, and they're full of apt cliches. You are the future. You have your whole lives ahead of you. Follow your dreams. I know that you've heard these things already, and I believe that they're true. But graduates, I don't think that cliches are what you're expecting from me. This is the graduation I most look forward to, because what we have shared together through your years here at the University of Washington is not just enthusiasm about your accomplishments and your potential, but our common commitment to women's studies. You've made a courageous choice to major or minor in a field that's not widely known or appreciated, which is intently rigorous but equally political, which brings as many questions as it does kudos. And I want to focus on some of those questions here today. You're graduating in the midst of an important shift in our field. As Professor Allen pointed out, you're breaking new ground as the first class in Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies. You've been asked many times, what is women's studies? What will you do as a major in women's studies? As we already discussed. Now you have to insert Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies into that, and into the questions about the meaning and purpose of your degree. Perhaps such questions become more complicated as you're asked, what is gender studies, what's women's studies, what's sexuality studies, and what are all of these things doing in the same place? If you can answer all of these questions about the department that we're now referring to as GWSS, even if you can answer them tentatively, you are perhaps what Professor Becky Anerud has recently termed a GWSSerd. And maybe that's why we wear these funny outfits. Over your years at the UW, you have learned and practiced ways to critique and unsettle what a woman means while understanding the political importance of this category. You've analyzed the ways that gender is not only a noun, but a verb. You've articulated the importance of race, class, location, sexuality, and ability as intersectional and inseparable, as a complex matrix of ideas and experiences and politics. The second question that I want to ask you is, how has women's studies shaped you as a person? Think about this for a moment. How has majoring in women's studies, or perhaps our new incarnation of GWSS, changed how you think about yourself and indeed who you are? For me, the field is not disciplinary, but a way of thinking, a critical analytic, and a range of global perspectives. When I took my first classes in women's studies 20 years ago this year, I felt like the gauze through which I had seen things that had covered the world had suddenly been lifted. I noticed things that had been invisible to me before. When asked to define feminism in my first class in women's studies, in my first semester as an undergraduate, and that was a class on women in literature, an English class, I didn't know how to address an assignment, which was basically to write a paragraph on what it means to be a feminist and whether or not I considered myself a feminist. So I looked in the dictionary, tried and true tactics. What was feminism anyway? What I found there in 1991 wasn't scary to me. It was a simple and sudden revelation. My dictionary defined feminism as social, political, and economic equality of the sexes and the theories and actions to achieve this. Well, I thought at the time, I believe in equality, so in that case, I'm a feminist. Through the sudden lens of feminism, the same television shows I had watched the year before looked completely different. Why were the characters so limited by race and heterosexuality? Common expressions became suspect. A rule of thumb was no longer an expression relating to a regular measurement, but a relic of when men could legally beat their wives with a stick no wider than their thumb. And as I learned more about the complicated histories of feminism, I became more interested in its potential. Something many of you may not know about me, which I share on the occasion of my 20-year high school reunion next weekend, is that in high school I was the homecoming queen. I had long blonde hair, and I was the captain of the varsity cheerleading squad. Discovering feminism didn't change any of that, and it didn't make me embarrassed about that past. But it did allow me space to expand my definition of what it meant to be a woman. And it gave me language to critique the racism and classism that I saw every day, to grow intellectually, to describe my experiences not just as an individual, but part of larger institutional structures of power. And it gave me the space to create a life in the service of justice. Graduates, I hope that these are some of the same ways that being part of women's studies here at the UW has shaped you as well, intellectually, critically, and personally. Education does not occur in a vacuum, and it's not something that happens to you. So my next question is, through your time at the UW, how have you shaped gender, women, and sexuality studies? In making a decision to be part of this department, you have claimed your education. In 1977, when women's studies was still in its infancy, poet and author Adrienne Rich gave a commencement address in which she asserted to students at a women's college, "You cannot afford to think of being here to receive an education. You will do much better to think of yourself as being here to claim one." For Rich, receiving an education was to come into possession of one, to act as a receptacle or a container, to accept as authoritative or true. This is not you, GWSSerds. You have done what Rich described as claiming an education, to take as rightful owner, to assert in the face of possible contradiction. In addition to claiming your education, you have been part of it and influenced those around you. Your activism and involvement have inspired and moved others. They have affected how GWS is understood by your classmates, your family, your friends, and more broadly. You have earned a degree from a department with a new name, and many of you have been part of this change. You have not only claimed your individual educational experience, but you have claimed the field in which you were brave enough to major or minor. The final question I want to ask, and what I leave you considering today, is how will you take the education you have claimed and transform the world? You have learned about the complex analyses and theories that are critical to women's studies, and you have learned that action is not supplemental to women's studies, but the heart of it. My advice to you as you think about your future is twofold. First, speak out about what you believe. After being diagnosed with the breast cancer that eventually caused her death, self-defined Black lesbian poet Audre Lorde elegantly and urgently pointed to the dangers of silence. Speaking out about what is important to you is never done without fear, but as Lorde put it, and I quote, "We can sit in our corners mute forever while our sisters and ourselves are wasted, while our children are distorted and destroyed, while our earth is poisoned. We can sit in our safe corners mute as bottles, and we will still be no less afraid." So I urge you to speak your truth, to respect justice more than fear. My second piece of advice is to broaden your imagination about your future. Go beyond the categories and paths that seem obvious. For me, women's studies has been central to this imagining. Creating a career growing from a bachelor's degree in women's studies to a PhD in feminist studies to my current position, and being part of the establishment of these undergraduate and graduate degree programs was transformational for me. Not only did this imagining allow me to study important and often ignored subjects and be in conversation with activist intellectuals who I found inspiring, but it gave me a sense of possibility. I could do critical and engaged work in Eastern and Southern Africa. I could be part of transnational struggles against HIV/AIDS, sexual violence, and trans and queer discrimination. I could bring practice to programmatic and pedagogical transformations of academia, and I could contribute to new ways of challenging oppression more broadly. At the same time I saw broad possibilities, these were coupled with constantly refreshed humility. To me, school is as much a process of unlearning as it is of learning. Perhaps you came to our Department of Women's Studies thinking you knew what a woman was, what the field was about. If you're like me, the more that you learned, the less that you knew, and I think that that's a good thing. Graduates, I hope that you will complete your journey at the UW today excited about critiquing and analyzing and playing a part in challenging injustice. Congratulations. You have made important strides in learning who you are, where you are, and what you can do to be part of social and economic change. I've already learned so much from you, and I look forward to seeing the amazing ways that you'll transform our world for the better. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. That was expected, terrific. Although it does give me the perverse idea that next year's graduation should have all of us on photographs of us as seniors in high school.